If you've ever travelled on Singapore's north-south or east-west lines, you might have once come across a train unlike any others. With yellow-tinted walls and sporting an old livery, riding on these trains felt like a window into the past. These are the Siemens C651s, the MRT's second generation of rolling stock. And the reason for their seemingly out-of-date appearance tells the story of the changing landscape of the Singapore MRT, which left the fate of these trains hanging in the balance. Between 1987 and 1990, Singapore's MRT network opened in stages. The initial plan for the completed system comprised of the East-West line, the North-South line, and a branch line between Jurong East and Choa Chu Kang. In 1991, the government announced its plans to connect the North-South line to the branch line to serve more residents in the north of the island. The Woodlands Extension, as it would later be known, would see the building of 6 new stations between Yishun and Choa Chu Kang, extending the MRT network by 16 kilometers. Such an extension would call for more trains, so as to ensure that the frequency of trains on the network remained unaffected. Hence, the Mass Rapid Transit Corporation, or MRTC, called a tender for 19 new trains to serve the extended network. German manufacturer Siemens won the bid for Contract 651, worth 259 million SGD. The new C651s, built in Vienna, appeared nearly identical to their predecessors, the first generation C151s, which were already operating on the network. However, the C651s had several new features, such as a more efficient propulsion system and an improved PA system that varied its volume depending on the amount of background noise present. Furthermore, the exterior of the C651 had a scratch-resistant acrylic finish, which was easier to clean compared to the unpainted aluminum exterior of the C151s. These additions resulted in each C651 costing roughly 50% more than a C151. Possibly the most distinct feature of the C651 was its Siemens traction motor, whose melodious sound when accelerating and decelerating would be associated with the train model. The first C651s began arriving in Singapore in September 1994, with the first trains officially entering revenue service on the 2nd of May 1995, 1 year before the opening of the Woodlands Extension. Given their status as new trains, the C651s found themselves the subject of numerous experimental programs by SMRT. In May 1997, C651 set 237238 was outfitted with several new features. In the blue cars, 3 seats per row were removed to provide more standing room next to the doors. In the orange cars, existing grab poles were modified by adding extra branches, allowing more commuters to use them. The most significant modification was in the teal cars, where the entire center row of seats was replaced by upholstered cushions, adorably called bum rests, enabling the train to handle more passengers during peak hours. These modifications were trialled on the North-South and East-West lines for 6 months and were well received by the public. As a result, 5 more C651s would have these modifications installed. Many of these features, pioneered by the C651s, would become commonplace in subsequent train models on the MRT network, such as the C751B and on the Alstom trains which served the Northeast and Circle lines. Alas, there was one modification that would never make a return. Those cozy cushioned bum rests, as plush as they may have been, would eventually be removed in the early 2000s, never to make an appearance on another train, at least not in that exact form. The idea of bum rests would later be introduced on other trains, such as the 7th generation R151s, which currently operate on the MRT, albeit none of them cushioned. However, life in revenue service wouldn't be entirely smooth sailing for the C651s. On the 14th of December 1997, During the evening peak hour, a C651 travelling southbound on the North-South line was pulling into City Hall station when suddenly one of the train's doors became partially dislodged, hanging from the train car. The dangling door smashed into two pairs of platform screen doors as the train pulled into the station, causing serious damage. Luckily, as the train was already coming to a stop, no one was hurt. The incident disrupted train service between Newton and Marina Bay, as the damaged train was taken to Marina Bay Station for repairs. Investigations would later blame the incident on human error. It turned out that earlier in the day, the train had been handed over to Siemens for a routine inspection. During the inspection, Siemens workers incorrectly installed the train door such that the lower part of the door was hanging outside the train rather than sitting within the groove attached to the train car. As a result of the incident, SMRT made its handover procedures with external parties more stringent. Another incident would occur on April 13, 1999. In the late morning, the automatic signalling system which controlled the track alignment between Yio Chu Kang and Ang Mo Kio failed. The Ang Mo Kio station master was sent to manually reset the tracks and resolve the issue. The station master was supposed to reset the tracks at 2 points. However, he seemingly overlooked 1 point in the tracks, resulting in a track misalignment. At 10 AM, an empty C651, set number 227228, was travelling southbound towards Bishan Depot after being taken out of service following the morning peak hour. On approach to Ang Mo Kio, the train jumped the tracks and derailed at the point where the tracks were misaligned, causing a power trip. The derailment caused a 7-hour service disruption to the North-South line, as the train had to be re-railed using hydraulic jacks. However, as the train was empty at the time and the derailment was minor, no one was hurt. Between 2006 and 2008, the MRT's first-generation C151 trains underwent a comprehensive midlife refurbishment program where numerous components such as electrical systems, air conditioning, and interior fittings were replaced. The refurbishment program was a success, with all C151s being completely overhauled by 2008, and it was only a matter of time till the second-generation C651s would receive the same treatment. That time would come in 2015. As the C651s approached their 20th year of service, SMRT began a comprehensive midlife refurbishment program similar to the refurbishment of the C151s. The renewal was conducted by Singapore Rail Engineering, a relatively new subsidiary of SMRT, established just the previous year, and it was intended that all C651s would be fully upgraded by 2018. The refurbishment would have seen the trains stripped down to their bare skeletons, with almost every aspect of the C651s being overhauled. Within the carriage, new seats, flooring, wheelchair spaces, and passenger information systems would be installed. The old pneumatic door system would be upgraded to an electric door system, and the original melodious Siemens motor would be replaced by a Toshiba PMSM motor. The trains would also be repainted in SMRT's new Pixel livery, the same livery worn by 5th generation C151Bs. The program initially progressed as planned, with 3 train sets undergoing upgrading works. SMRT even organized a press event where media representatives were invited to get an exclusive preview of the new trains. It all seemed to be going perfectly well. News about the refurbished trains dried up, with no word from SMRT or LTA about the C651s for several months, leaving the public wondering, what happened to them? In 2016, a wrench was thrown into the C651 refurbishment works when LTA announced its new Rail Financing Framework, or NRFF. There's a lot to unpack in the NRFF, but it basically stated that LTA would shift the way it approached to dealing with older trains, favouring buying new rolling stock instead of refurbishing old trains. This left the ongoing C651 refurbishment program in limbo, and SMRT was forced to choose between continuing the midlife refurbishment program or abandoning it. The C651 fleet did undergo a significant upgrade in 2016 when the trains were fitted with the Thales CBTC moving block signalling system, a change which saw 2 seats on either end of the train removed to accommodate the new signalling equipment. However, That's as far as any fleet-wide upgrade got, and SMRT's final decision on the refurbishment program would only be announced a few years later. In 2016, LTA announced that the first generation C151s would be retired and replaced by a new fleet of 66 trains, then known as the Bombardier Movia R151s. In 2020, this new order of 66 R151s was expanded to 106, with LTA announcing that it would also begin the decommissioning of its second generation C651s and third generation C751B trains. The decision to replace all three generations of rolling stock with the same train model was made in an effort to simplify and standardize maintenance procedures on the network, and it would spell the final end of the C651. As the C651s were unrefurbished and very outdated, they were some of the first trains to be decommissioned and began to swiftly disappear from the network. Some of the first C651s to go were the three refurbished train sets, 217, 218, 225, 226, and 227, 228. None of the refurbished trains would ever get the chance to see revenue service, and all three would be scrapped in 2 hours. They would soon be followed by the rest of the C651 fleet. Some train cars were able to escape the jaws of death. A couple of train cars from train set 229-230 were handed over to the Singapore Police Force for use in training. Moreover, the National Museum of Singapore preserved a pair of C651 train doors, seats, and map display due to the historical insight these unrefurbished items provided into the early days of the MRT, making them the first ever MRT relics to enter the National Museum's collection. However, no other trains would enjoy a second lease of life. The last train sets to be officially decommissioned were 201, 202, 207, 208, and 237-238, which were quietly pulled from service without fanfare in September of 2024 and scrapped in 2 hours the following month. The C651s were unique amongst the varied fleet of the North-South and East-West lines, having been almost untouched since the earliest days of the MRT. The unique circumstances surrounding the fate of these trains arguably enabled the unrefurbished C651s to remain in service longer than they should have, and they became a beloved staple for their rarity and the unique experience it was to ride them. Alas, nothing lasts forever, and like many things in Singapore, the old trains had to make way for the future, but their presence will be fondly remembered by many.